Good morning. Let's get started. Thank you very much for attending today's webinar, Building Supply Chain Digital Automation with Boomi. Teqtron and Boomi are very excited today to discuss with you our digital automation solutions regarding supply chain and customer order, sales order fulfillment. I'll be your host today. My name is Barry Gurman. I'm the Director of Sales for Teqtron. As you can see on the agenda, we have a full schedule. We're scheduled to complete the event probably within about 45 minutes. That's presentation and demos. So we still have probably around 15 minutes or so for time to ask questions or if you want to request further information. Couple housekeeping issues. We've muted everyone during the presentations, but we do welcome questions. So if you could either enter them in the chat, we will note those down and respond at the end of at the conclusion of the demonstration. If a question comes up later and you'd like to be able to verbally present the question, you all have that raised hand feature in WebEx, so please use that, and we will call on you and unmute you. Also, just let everybody know that we are recording the webinar for our records. And honestly, we're going to try to get through everything and answer all the questions, because I know usually we've had a lot of questions in our series of webinars. So why don't we get started? The agenda is pretty simple. We'll go through a brief overview of who Teqtron is. Many of you do know a little bit about us, but we'll give you a little bit more, and then we'll get into the demonstration and the solution. So, Teqtron is committed to Boomi and their solutions. A very high level of commitment. We are a systems integrator for Boomi, providing a wide range of Boomi solutions. We started in 2011, so we're over 10 years old. Teqtron has built strong practices around supply chain areas, particularly in product lifecycle management, ERP, B2B, and digital technologies. We'll be reviewing all of those today with really focus on the ERP, B2B, and digital. And of course, the emphasis that we have found with our customers and prospects has been supply chain. And as you know, there's been tons of problems with supply chain, inflation, and how it's affecting our daily life. In the corporate area, the supply chain is currently going through a huge transformation and automation process. Using ERP systems and middleware. And this is really trying to meet the global market challenges and complexities. Fortunately, modern platforms like Boomi and API management services are well placed in meeting these challenges and help build competitive advantages for the organizations that take advantage of these solutions. And really what we're doing is speeding up the flow and helping you manage any errors or inconsistencies along the way. As we know, nothing is perfect. Teams from our digital practice are constantly working with our customers to connect applications, data, and services across multiple clouds and on-prem using the hybrid model. Today, we're really going to focus and discuss on one such digital automation solution, and it's all based on Dell Boomi. Interesting, we also will be using Boomi Flow, which is embedded in the customer fulfillment process as the GUI. So why don't we get into the meat of the presentation? Our senior software developer, Mahi Chatterjee, will be presenting this simulated B2B solution using both Boomi and SAP. Mahi?
Thank you for the introduction, Barry, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So my name is Mahi, and I will be presenting one of the first solutions, which is actually a part of a webinar series that has been initiated by Teqtron. The entire webinar series focuses on automation solutions for the sales order industry. So I will begin by walking you all through a broad picture of what we have widely identified as the complexities and challenges of the supply chain industry. And from there, we will move on to a multi-partner integration system for sales order fulfillment, which is our prime focus for today. So let's begin by understanding the business challenges. This slide shows how a typical supply chain is happening in the world today, right? This supply chain is not only global, but it is also very complex and competitive. Dynamic changes are taking place constantly, and the time to respond to them is getting shorter and shorter. With increase in competition, margin is low, all the while business consolidation is constantly on the rise. So this obviously brings in an increase in the volume of business transactions. And as this volume increases, so do the complexities that are associated with them. So in order to match the pace of businesses in a competitive business space, we have to be agile, and our systems have to be dynamic as well as scalable in nature. In order to do that, companies nowadays are leveraging modern technologies to create competitive advantages, which is why, as a part of this webinar series, we will be targeting certain links in this supply chain network, which can be automated, and we will be presenting integration solutions to that leverages technology and which will streamline this complex exchange of information. So like I mentioned before, our area of focus today is the sales order fulfillment cycle. And today we will be reviewing the architecture of the solution that we are proposing, the features of the user interface that comes with the solution, followed by a very high level demonstration use case. So let's begin, and I'll begin by elaborating on the business needs. So as a business, what are some evident challenges that you think about when you are thinking about a sales order transaction? To name a few, we have high volume of data. We have inconsistency in the file format in which the information is being exchanged. We have bulk information. Then there is a continuous change in schedule and so on, right? Most of the times, even the validation requirements differ from customer to customer. There was a major breakthrough in this domain, basically, with the introduction of EDI, and EDI was able to streamline most of these differences. But even with EDI, sometimes the same information is coming as a part of different segments. So now, as any business would, right, over time, we develop a system to manage these differences and automate the processing of these transactions. But every time a new customer is onboarded, they bring their own set of validations, right? And in own set of specifications, basically. And in order to accommodate those specifications, we either have to re-engineer our already existing system, or in some cases, we have to develop a fresh system from the scratch. In either cases, due to this lack of scalability in the current system, some actions or functions that are generic across all customers may appear as repetitive or redundant. So basically, identifying this as one of the bottlenecks of the supply chain industry, the Teqtron team has designed a one-stop integration solutions that can cater to the needs of multiple trading partners and can easily be scaled to include the requirements of new customers with little to no changes to the existing system. So at a high level, our solution comprises of two components. We have an integration component and we have a user interface component. Our integration component is employing a Boomi as our middleware, and it caters to, this integration component is basically responsible for exchanging information with the customers in multiple file formats, such as EDI, XML, JSON, and CSV. While the idea behind the user interface is to provide a visual resource to review all the information that is actually getting exchanged in the form of files, to control access to this information, and in some cases, catch and correct errors. So as a part of this presentation today, we will be reviewing both these components in detail. And we will be covering the architecture of our integration component, the features of the user interface, and we'll follow it with a demonstration. So at a high level, I'll just go through the scope of the current version of our solution. Our solution currently caters to 4 file formats. We have EDI, XML, JSON, and CSV. The data transport protocol that we are using right now in the current version is an SFTP server, but this can very easily be either replaced or extended to any other data transport protocol that you might have in your use case. This system has also been successfully integrated with the SAP ERP as well as the Oracle EBS ERP. And in the current scope, we are tending to 5 transaction sets basically. We have 850, 855, 856, 860, and 870, of which 850 purchase order creation and 860 purchase order change request are inbound transactions, and the other 3 are outbound transactions. So now we'll move on to the solution and we'll understand its components one by one. So like I mentioned, the entire integration solution comprises of 2 main components. We have an integration component. So this part of the diagram is the integration component. And then we have the user interface component. So let's talk about the integration component first. Our integration component has 3 major blocks. We have a data transport layer block. The role of this data transport layer block is basically to interact with the customers for both inbound as well as outbound transactions. So basically for inbound transactions, the customers send us their input files with the help of this data transport layer block. And for outbound transactions, customers collect their outgoing files with the help of this data transport layer block. Next, we have the middleware block, which in our case is the Boomi block. So this middleware block actually acts as an interface between the data transport layer block and the ERP system block, which is a third block. And any kind of logical operations, such as handling of different file formats that I just mentioned, all those things are taken care of in this middleware block, basically. Finally, we have the ERP system block. So depending on the transaction set, any kind of ERP system specific operations or functions that is handled within the ERP system block. So one more thing I would like to bring here is for inbound transactions, basically the flow of documents is from the customer to the data transport layer. Finally, it ends at the ERP system. Outbound transactions, they begin at the ERP system and then they conclude at the data transport layer block. So basically, I'll be elaborating on both these types of transactions and what exactly is happening in all the 3 blocks as we proceed in this presentation today. So this was a high-level introduction to the architecture of our integration component. Coming to the user interface component, let's not talk about the architecture of the user interface component. Instead, I'll highlight some of the features of our user interface. So we know that the information, any kind of sales order information is bulk information, basically. So in our user interface, we are displaying all this information in the form of tables. Now, every purchase order or every sales order basically has some item information associated with them as well. So in this tabular view, we are giving a very orderly view of both header as well as item level information. So again, I'm just going through the user interface features briefly right now. When I'm showing the demonstration, I will be reiterating on all these points, and I will actually be demonstrating all of these points during the demonstration today. So we have a tabular representation of data. We have filtering and sorting on the table data. So it's not only at the table level, but we also have an advanced filter feature where we can basically select which information we want to display on the table based on multiple criteria, such as customer names, the current status a transaction is in, date range, or maybe file name, and so on. right? So that is the advanced filter feature that we have. Then again, when we talk about a sales order transaction, volume is an understood concept, right? We have high volume of data. And because we have high volume of data, we can always expect errors. So with the help of this user interface, we are also providing editable fields to correct those errors. And we also have the scope of submitting these changes for reprocessing. And both these editable feature and the resubmission feature is actually a part of a very extensive identity and access management system that comes with the user interface. The entire IAM module has been designed at a very granular level. And again, I will be iterating on how these permissions and roles work when I'm demonstrating the user interface. So let's move on. Okay, so at this point, we must have a high-level understanding of the architecture of our solution and what basically is the flow of data, basically the direction of data. What I'll be doing now is we have two types of transactions. We have inbound transactions and we have outbound transactions. So we will be reviewing the inbound transaction first. I will be going a little more in depth about what is happening in the inbound transaction. Then we will go to a demonstration for an inbound transaction, one use case of an inbound transaction. We'll review how the integration component and the user interface component, they interact with each other for an inbound transaction. And then we will do the same for an outbound transaction as well. So let's begin with understanding the inbound transaction a little bit in detail. Like I mentioned, our integration component basically has three blocks. We have the data transport layer block, we have the Boomi block, and we have the ERP system block. And the flow of data for inbound transaction is from data transport layer to the ERP system. Again, the role of the data transport layer is pretty simple. The customers are sending us their incoming files with the help of this data transport layer. So now let's come to the second block, which is our Boomi block. Now, Boomi allows us to schedule integration processes to be executed at configurable intervals. So we have Boomi processes that are scheduled to execute. So anytime any new customers, they place their files in the data transport layer or send us their files with the help of a data transport layer, in the next execution of the scheduled Boomi process, these files are picked from the data transport layer block and brought inside our middleware block. Once it is inside the middleware block, the first step that takes place is triggering of customer-specific subprocess. So I'll be highlighting 2 points over here. The first point is we have a Boomi scheduled process, and inside that scheduled process, we have customer-specific subprocesses. So the idea behind the customer-specific sub-processes is basically to handle any kind of customer-specific requirements that might come. We handle that in this customer-specific sub-process. So this is the part of the solution which actually makes the entire integration system very scalable, because anytime a new customer is onboarded, right, we are only concerned with creating a new customer specific sub process, while the rest of the steps that follow that sub process still remain the same, right? So this reduces a lot of effort when it comes in terms of development. So this was the first point, that we are handling customer specific requirements in a customer specific sub process. The second point is when I mentioned that these processes are triggered, customer specific sub processes are triggered, they're actually dynamically triggered. So say, for instance, you have 1,000 customers, right? If you have 1,000 customers, you will be having 1,000 customer specific sub processes. But at a time, if inside this Boomi process, we are only processing 10 documents at a time, only those 10 customer specific sub processes for those 10 documents is going to be triggered. So this makes the entire Boomi process very efficient in nature as well. So we saw how with the help of Boomi, our solutions can be scalable as well as dynamic in nature, right? So let's move on to what is happening at a high level inside every customer specific sub process. The idea is very simple. It handles customer specific requirements. So we have a trading partner validation and a number of other steps. And as a final step of this customer specific sub process, we are basically standardizing this data to a master format. Now let's visualize for a second, right? We have incoming data in multiple file formats with different specifications for all file formats, right? So at this point, what we are doing is at every customer specific sub-process, we are handling the mapping in such a way that the same information that might be coming in different EDI segments or different XML attributes can be mapped to the right field in this master format. And so the document which leaves this customer specific sub-process is always going to be in the master format, and the rest of the information, rest of the operations take place in this master format that we have. So that is the idea of the master format. Basically, we are standardizing all the information irrespective of what format or what file, what format or what specifications of the file the information is coming in. It is leaving the customer specific sub-process in the master format. So moving on, once the information is back in the main process, we have a first level of validations taking place. And as a last step of this middleware block for inbound transactions, the information is sent to the ERP system, right? So the information is sent to the ERP system. This concludes the role of the inbound transaction. Now coming to the this role of the middleware block, basically. Now coming to the third block, which is the ERP system block. So within the ERP system block as well for inbound transactions, we have scheduled programs which are again scheduled to execute at configurable intervals, right? This scheduled program is basically listening for any new information that might be coming from the middleware block. So anytime the Boomi process prepares, sends the information to the ERP system, in the next execution of this scheduled program, that information is picked, and depending on the transaction set that depending on the inbound transaction set, we perform the ERP system specific operations within this scheduled program. At a high level, some of the steps that might be common to all the inbound transactions is validation of the incoming data, maybe fetching some more information from the master tables that we might have in our ERP system, and in some cases such as 850 or 860, calling the ERP system provided APIs. So basically, our inbound transaction ends at the ERP system block and is initiated at the data transport layer block. So I hope this was a little bit clear about what is happening in the inbound transaction. What we are going to do now is we are going to review a demonstration for an inbound transaction. The transaction set that I will be using is 850, which is purchase order. The data transport layer is going to be an SFTP server, and the ERP system is the SAP ERP. The data set for this demonstration is on your screen. For what I will be doing is I will be processing 4 850 purchase orders for 4 customers in 4 different file formats. All these 4 850 purchase orders can be identified by their unique identifiers, which is the customer purchase order number. And it begins, all these purchase order numbers begin with web inbound, followed by the format in which the information is coming. So for this demonstration, the first block of inbound transaction, which is placing the files in the SFTP server, is already been taken care of. So I already have these 4 files residing in my SFTP server. Next, I will be executing the Boomi process, otherwise scheduled Boomi process manually. Then once the Boomi process executes, we'll go to the user interface. We'll review how this information, how this processing is reflected in the user interface. While we are reviewing the user interface, I am expecting the scheduled program in the ERP system to execute. Once that is done, what we will see is that the XML, JSON, and CSV files, these 850 files will get successfully processed, and the purchase orders will get converted to sales orders successfully. But our EDI file is going to fail a validation at the ERP system level. So we will go back to the user interface again. We'll find this 850 order. We'll make the required corrections. We'll submit it for reprocessing. And in the next execution of the ERP system schedule process, even the EDI file should get successfully processed. So let's begin with the demonstration. These 4 files are already residing in the SFTP server. So let's move on to the second block, which is our Boomi block. So I am manually triggering this Boomi process here. So just as a quick revision, this Boomi process basically picks any new files in the SFTP server and sends this information to the ERP system. Currently, we are expecting 4 incoming files in this process. So let's review if we receive the 4 files correctly. Here we can see we have 4 files. And I'll just quickly review. Here we can see the customer purchase order number for the EDI file, right? Then we have next, which is our JSON file. So this is the customer purchase order number for the JSON file. Similarly, we should have the XML file, I believe. That's right. So we have the XML file here. And similarly, we will have a CSV file as well. Here we can see the customer purchase order number for the CSV file, right? Now our Boomi block has executed. Now I'll go to the user interface. This is our user interface, and I am logging in as a user. So this user that I'm logging in as is has full permissions basically to view, edit, or submit the transactions. But this can again be controlled with the help of our identity and access management system. So the information that this user is able to see is because basically the user has the view permissions for these 4 customers, right? Here we can see how the 850 data is displayed in the form of tables. Every row in this table basically corresponds to one purchase order, right? We have table, as I said, we have filtering and sorting on our table. So for instance, we can see we can sort the information here. I can also, for this demonstration, to show basically the filtering at the tabular level, I just filtered the information that is relevant to our use case today. So here we can see the 4 transactions that we have as a part of our inbound transaction. Every row can be expanded further. For example, I can expand every row like this to display the item information that is associated with every purchase order. So this filtering and sorting at the tabular level is available for both header as well as item level data, right? So we can even sort and filter data at the item level as well. So these are some of the features that come with our table user interface. Another important feature that comes at both header and item level for this tabular data is the column selection feature. So basically, we know we get bulk information associated with every purchase order or sales order. So here, with the help of this column selection feature, we can select what information we want to display on the table at a time. So for instance, I selected the batch ID, and I'm going to make a note of this batch ID range, which ranges from 312 to 315, because I will be needing that in the future. So I noted this, and similarly, we can select other columns that we want to display and that we don't want to display basically. That is one thing, another feature that comes with our table at both header and item level. So before I go to the advanced filter and demonstrate how the advanced filter works, I would like to bring everyone's notice to this process status column. Now, when I logged in as this user into the user interface, my second block for inbound transaction, which was the Boomi block, had executed, but all these 4 purchase orders were still pending processing at the ERP system level block, right? Therefore, all these 4 inbound files are treated as new record or records that are pending processing. Therefore, the process status for these transactions is N. Now let's review the advanced filter. So this is the advanced filter feature that comes with the user interface. Here we can display here we can select the information displayed in the table based on multiple criteria, such as customer names or the current status a transaction is in, maybe a date range in depending on a use case. I will be using batch ID, which I mentioned is which I just used the column selection feature for. So my batch ID range was from 312 to 315. I'm going to submit this data just to see, in the meantime, our ERP system schedule program should have executed. Therefore, just to refresh this data on the table, I use the advanced filter tab. And here we can see we have our purchase orders. As expected, our CSV, JSON, and XML files were successfully processed, and that can be seen with the help of this process status, which is S, indicating a successful record. And the corresponding sales order numbers for these transactions can also be seen over here. And as expected, our EDI file failed a validation and at the ERP system level block. Therefore, the process status for the EDI file is E, indicating an error transaction. One thing we will all notice is that two action buttons appear here on the right. These are basically because this user that I logged in as is a super user and has the edit permissions as well. So I'll click on the edit button, and we will notice that only the invoice to org ID column becomes editable for this EDI file. So basically, I would like to highlight this is where the IAM part comes in. We can actually control the edit permissions for any user at a level, at the field level as well. So this user only has the edit permissions for invoice to org ID column. And I'm going to make the change because I know what caused the ERP system program to fail. And I'm going to save this change. We will review this change. We can see this change in the process status column. The process status is now C, and that change is reflected in the user interface. Now, another button appears over here. That is because, again, this user has the submit permissions as well. So as this user, I am going to approve this transaction, approve this change basically that has been made. And we will see that the EDI file, for the EDI file, the process status is again N. Therefore, in the next execution of the ERP system schedule program, this EDI file should be picked again and should be and will be treated as a new record and should get successfully processed. So again, I'll make use of our advanced filter, and I'm giving the same batch ID range, and I'll click on submit just to refresh the data. And let's review how this change is displayed. So here we can see even our EDI file now has a process status of S, and the corresponding order number can be seen over here. So this is basically how our integration component as well as the user interface interact with each other for an inbound transaction. We saw the IAM module, we saw how editing and submission works, and we saw how how we can control access to this information for different users in our organization. Coming to the outbound transaction, I will very briefly go over the outbound transaction because more or less the functions and operations are very similar to inbound transaction. It's just the flow of document is exactly the reverse for outbound transactions. So it begins at the ERP system level and it ends at the data transport layer block. So basically at the ERP system block for outbound transaction, we have background jobs. So suppose I want to generate outbound files for XYZ sales orders. Basically, I will be triggering this background job for those XYZ sales orders. And the main function of this background job for outbound transactions is basically to prepare this information to be processed further by the Boomi process. Right. So at a high level, we fetch the sales order information. We validate that information, and as a last step, we finally prepare this information to be picked by the Boomi process, which is our second block. For outbound transactions as well, we have scheduled Boomi processes, again scheduled to execute at configurable intervals. This outbound process is basically listening for any new information coming from the ERP system level, ERP system block. So anytime this background job is executed and our data is prepared for the Boomi process, in the next execution of the scheduled Boomi process, this information is brought inside the middleware. Again, we are triggering customer-specific sub-processes here. The idea is the same as the inbound transactions. Inside every customer-specific sub-process, basically we handle customer-specific requirements, we validate the outgoing data, and as a last step, for every customer-specific sub-process for an outbound transaction, we are transforming this information coming from the ERP system to the file format in which the customer is expecting the outgoing files. So the document leaves this customer-specific sub-process in different file formats. And as a last step of this Boomi process, these files are finally placed in the data transport layer or sent to the customer with the help of this data transport layer. So this was the flow of an outbound transaction. It goes from the ERP system block to the data transport layer block. For this demonstration, for a demonstration of an outbound transaction, I'll be demonstrating the 856 transaction set, which is the advanced ship notice. The data transport layer is still an SFTP server, and the ERP system is again SAP. So for this demonstration, I already have 4 sales orders created, because for 856, our sales orders have to be either in the delivery created state or the ship confirmed state. So I'm going to use some previously created sales orders, and I will be generating 856 outbound files for 4 customers in 4 different file formats. All these 4 outbound files can be recognized by their customer purchase order numbers. The purchase order numbers begin with web outbound, followed by the file format in which the outbound file is being generated. For this demonstration, I have already taken care of the first block, which is executing the ERP system level block that prepares the data for the Boomi process. So before I go to the Boomi process, let's go to the user interface and review how this information is displayed for the 856 data. This user that I'm logged in as currently also has the view permissions for 856 transaction set. Here we can see the customer purchase order numbers that are a part of our demonstration use case. And at this point, for 856 data, our ERP system block has executed, but our Boomi block is still pending execution, right? I haven't triggered the Boomi process yet. Therefore, the process status for all these 4 files is N, indicating a new record or a record that hasn't been processed yet. We have the same features for outbound transactions as well. For the user interface, we have a drill down feature to review the items associated with every sales order. We have column selection feature at both header and item level. We have sorting and filtering at the tabular level, and also we have the advanced filter feature for 856. So this is basically how the information appears in the user interface when the ERP system block executes. Now I'm going to go to the middleware block, which is our Boomi block, and I'm going to manually trigger the 856 process. This 856 process will be picking up the information that has been prepared by our ERP system, performing the necessary validations and transformations required. And this 856, when this process concludes, we should have 4 856 files residing in our SFTP server. So let's make sure that I got 4 files as I was expecting. And here we can see we have 4 documents. So basically 4 files were processed, and this process has successfully completed. Therefore, we should have 4 outbound files. Before I review the outbound files, I'll quickly go to the user interface and I'll refresh this 856 data just to showcase how this change is reflected in the user interface. So here we see for our 4 sales orders, basically, the process status has changed to S after I executed the Boomi process, indicating that these records were also successfully processed. So let's go and review the 4 files that should reside in my SFTP server. So this is the SFTP server, and I'm going to refresh the data. Based on the timestamp here, we can see that 4 new files have been generated. So I'm going to 4 new files in 4 different file formats. So I'm going to just copy these files in my local system, and we'll review these files one by one. So here are the files that I just copied. This is the EDI file. I'm just going to make it a little bit more presentable for everyone. So there we go. So this is the outbound 856 file. Here we can see the transaction set, and this is the customer purchase order number. And this is the timestamp on the file that was just created. So we can see that this is the file we just got. Similarly, we have the CSV file. And here we can see the customer purchase order number for the CSV file. Similarly, we should have the JSON file here, and we can see the JSON file for 856 transaction set, and this is the customer purchase order number. And similarly, we should have an XML file. This is the customer purchase order number for the XML file, and here is the 856 basically transaction ID. So this concludes my demonstration for the outbound transaction as well. And we again saw how the integration component and UI interact with each other for an outbound transaction. And we saw that 4 outbound 856 files in 4 different file formats were generated as expected. So from here, I will be handing over the control back to Barry, and he will be taking over from here. Thank you.
Great, Mahi. Thank you very much. The very great presentation. Hopefully everybody was able to follow. As you saw, these solutions do meet those customers' changing business challenges that revolve around the supply chain and customer order fulfillment process. And we can handle it both from inbound as well as outbound. We do have a few questions. The first one is from Aluk. So let me go through this, and I'll read the question, and we'll have answers. And again, if you want to submit questions, please submit on the chat, as well as if you raise your hand, we'll unmute you. This is a question, so let's go through them, and then Mahi, I guess you'll respond. What kind of volume of sales order creation and fulfillment is supported? Also, is there a restriction on the size of the order? And what about 865?
So,
Mahi?
yes, definitely. So Boomi is very flexible when it comes to talking about scalability and the size of order. So there is no restriction on the size of order. We have in our current execution, we are only catering to 5 transaction sets, but that is just what was the scope of our project. So we haven't encountered any bottlenecks yet. So I think I believe 865 should also be very easy to include in our use case, basically. And what kind of volume of sales order and creation? Again, the volume, Boomi is a very flexible platform, and it is, like I showed, because of the customer specific sub processes, it's a very scalable solution. So volume is shouldn't be a concern for this solution.
Great. Thank you very much, Mahi. It looks like Sorath has a question. Let me unmute you. And what is your, hold on one second. What is your question?
Yeah, thank you, Barry, and thanks, Mai, for the presentation. I have a few questions. So my first one is you touched upon it a little bit, that you can define customer specific rules, I guess, in your customer specific sub process. So how exactly do you define those rules, and how much scalability does it have?
So scalability, again, those sub-processes are usually very small in size. So any kind of validation specifications, anything. For example, if you want to give a date range for a transaction to error out, right? If you don't want a delivery to be created, if it doesn't fall in a 30-day margin, this is just an example of a certain validation. We can easily handle that in the customer specific sub-process. So yes, the size of customer specific sub-process is usually same, and usually within 2 or 3 steps, we are able to handle any kind of customer specifications that might be coming. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. So yeah, to follow-up question on that. So let's say we define a rule. Let's take an example of these dates. If my transaction does not follow under this rule and the validation fails, then you showed us that it errors out. The status says N, right? In that case, does a message go to or a notification goes to the customer, or the customer, Netflix or whatever Safeway you had mentioned? Do they get informed when it errors out?
Yes. So again, this is going to be a customer specific specification, right? So in case if a customer wants us to send notifications, yes, Boomi integration platform also has that feature. We can send notifications in the form of feeds or emails or text messages, whatever works for you. On another way we can handle this is maybe we can maintain logs for if any kind of errors are coming, because these changes are anyway going to be reflected in the user interface, even if it gets errored out. But as you asked about the notifications, yes, that can very easily be included. And again, this I just presented the high level use case, depending on your requirements, we can definitely take care of these small features that we need.
Got it. Yeah. And then you showed us that on the table, you had approved one of the failed transactions. So that was an exception. Let's say the rule failed, but you can still override that rule and process the transaction for a particular customer. Is that correct?
That is again a very good question. So yes, so because of timing constraints today, I was only able to highlight certain roles and permissions that are a part of our IAM module. But actually, we also have an override rule or feature where if a user has the override role, even if a transaction errors out and if you want it to be still processed, you can override the error and the transaction will process as expected. So that actually comes as a part of the IAM module.
Nice. Okay. And one more. So how much time does it take? Let's say you get a file in your SFTP. From that time till the data is loaded into the ERP system, how much time, worst case and best case scenario?
So it will depend on the interval in which you want to schedule your integration process as well as the ERP system process. But what I executed, like I manually executed it. So technically these things can finish in seconds, in matter of seconds, where you immediately, depending on if you schedule your Boomi process to execute every 30 seconds, once the Boomi process runs or once the ERP system process runs, it does not take too much time to process. So this timing basically depends on the interval that you give for scheduling the process, basically.
Got it. Does it also handle, let's say a customer initiated an order, does it also handle cancel orders?
Yes. So that can be included in the ERP system program. So yes, this will also handle canceled orders.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. I think that
Thank you.
answered my
Great.
questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see another hand up, Dinesh. Let me unmute you. What is your question? Oops.
Yeah, Dinesh here. Is this solution just for Boomi integration platform or any other middleware like MuleSoft can be incorporated?
So basically, all the three blocks that are a part of our integration component, basically data transport layer, middleware block, or the ERP system block, they can all be extended or replaced based on your requirements. Suppose if you have MuleSoft, so we can do that too. I should have someone from my team reach out to you to discuss more about the integration solutions for other middlewares, right? So I'll have someone from my team definitely reach out to you.
Okay, I've got a question from Reza. Building the automation data flow, is it for business team or the IT team? Do we have an answer to that, Mahi, or?
So this depends on the implementation, basically. So like what are your requirements, what you are looking for, so we can customize this solution to be more suitable for the business team or the IT team. Again, I should have someone from my team reach out to you to discuss this more in detail. So yeah.
Thank you, Mahi. I see a hand raised. Ashish, you have a question. Let me unmute you. There you go. Ashish, are you there?
Hey, hi. Hey, Mahi. Thanks for the presentation. I just have one question. The data format that you mentioned, what is the benefit of the master data format?
Excellent question. So I think I'll be able to answer this question if I give an example. So let's take an example of request date. Right now, we have the sales order information coming in multiple formats. One could be XML and one could be EDI. In EDI, we can have different segments. Maybe in one EDI file, it is captured in the DTM segment, or in another EDI segment, this could just be a part of an REF segment, right? So this request date could come in different segments for different customers, but the actual purpose of this request date is the same for both the customers, right? It is actually a request date. Similarly, for XML file, one tag could be request date. For another customer, it could just be rec date, right? So this is basically the difference in the specifications for different file formats. So when we have a master format, as long as we are mapping the different attributes or the different segments, as long as we are mapping the same information to the same column in the master format, and the information leaving the customer specific sub process is in the master format, the ERP system recognizes data in the master format, so all the rest of the process becomes very streamlined. So I hope you got some clarity about what I was trying to explain with this example.
I see. So the system will be able to handle the needs of different partners which are sending the data in different formats also. Oh,
Yeah,
that's great.
that's exactly the point of the master data format. You got it correct, Ashish.
All right.
Very
All
good.
right.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Ashish. I've got another question on the chat. Mahumamita, I apologize on the name. For the specific PO, do we know if the shipment was successful, failed, or was it partially shipped? How do we, well, let's answer that question first.
Yes. I can take that question. Hi, Madhumita. Thank you for your question. Yes, basically the user interface, we can filter the information based on the PO number or the sales order number, right? And the user, I only displayed like a few columns in the user interface, but basically there is a column which is also reflecting whether a particular order is in the ship state, partially ship state, and depending on the current status of that particular sales order, our process status column is reflecting the current status the sales order is in, right? So as an answer to your question, I hope I got your question correctly, but yes, basically we can review this in the user interface.
And then her second question, how do we see the status of the 860, 856, 855 for specific 850s?
We can always, so for 850, so before a sales order is created and we are receiving 850 purchase order, the unique identifier is the customer purchase order number, right? So basically, depending in the advanced filter feed, again, we can customize the user interface based on your use cases as well. But for every other transaction except 850, we do have a filter feature for customer purchase order number. So basically, you can filter the purchase order number, filter the information based on the 850 purchase order number, and then we can and then you can review the status for the different transaction sites, 856 or 860 or 855.
Great, thank you. I see we have one more question from David. I know we're at noon, and again, I appreciate everybody joining us. Let me just ask that question. Are you controlling the access for different partners, Mahi?
Yes, actually, for the user interface, I assume this question is directed for the user interface. So the answer is yes. So for every transaction set, we can control which user has the permissions or the permissions to view the information for which customers. So yes, we can actually, how we are controlling this is actually a part of the implementation. We'll go very much in detail, but that is basically the gist of it. You can control access to any transaction set for any customers, for any user, basically.
Great. Thank you very much, Mahi. And I really do thank everybody for joining us this morning and for your time today. I know that you're busy, your schedules are extremely busy. What we'd like to do is in the chat, we've sent a message with our contact information, my contact information, as well as there should be a slide up. Yes, it is, giving additional information regarding us. And we look forward to speaking with all of you. I'll be reaching out. So just let you know, I'll be reaching out to you in the next few days to follow up. And again, thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us, and have a great day. Bye-bye.